Hi everyone, I am Chirag Thakkar, Commissioning Editor at Roli Books, and you're watching Roli Pulse, a digital initiative by Roli. One of the things we wanted to do at Roli is have a conversation across the board with our peers in the publishing world and encourage exchange and cross pollination of ideas and perspectives. Every week, we will try and bring you an episode of this series called Publishing Perspectives. Remember, you can check out all our previous videos and sessions on our YouTube channel, our IGTV, which is our Instagram handle, as well as on Facebook and Twitter. If you want us to put out more such content, then show us your love, type in your comments in the comment section below, and share this with your friends, peers, and anyone you wish to. This is the third episode of Publishing Perspectives, where we are going to be discussing publishing trends in a post-COVID world. And I'm very pleased to welcome our brilliant set of speakers for today. We have Alexandra Pringle, Diya Kar, Sayantan Ghosh, in conversation with Amit Varma. Alexandra was editor-in-chief at Bloomsbury UK for 20 years, where she is now executive publisher. She's worked with authors such as Margaret Atwood, Susanna Clarke, Tishani Doshi, Richard Ford, Esther Freud, Elizabeth Gilbert, Khalid Hosseini, Jhumpa Lahiri, George Saunders, and many others. We have Sayantan Ghosh, who was born in Calcutta and lives and writes in New Delhi. Presently, he is senior commissioning editor at Simon & Schuster India. His work has been published in Electric Literature, Litro Magazine, the Aerogram, Missing Slate, Bangalore Review, among other publications. We're also joined by Diya Kar, who is publisher and rights director at HarperCollins India. She began her career at HarperCollins over 2 decades ago and has over the years worked at Penguin, Bloomsbury, and Pan Macmillan. Of course, Alexandra, Diya, and Sayantan are going to be in conversation with Amit Varma. Amit is a writer and podcaster based in Bombay. He's been a journalist for over 2 decades and won the Bastiat Prize for Journalism twice in 2007 and 2015. He's a columnist for the Times of India, among others. He hosts The Seen and Unseen, a deep dive interview-based show that is one of India's most popular weekly podcasts. Amit also teaches an online course, The Art of Clear Writing. So welcome to Roli Pulse, Alexandra, Sayantan, Diya, and Amit. I do hope you enjoy this conversation. I will just have Amit take over and dive right into this chat.
Thanks for that, Chirag. Good evening. Welcome to Roli Pulse, a digital initiative from Roli Books. I'm Amit Varma, and the topic we'll be discussing today is publishing trends post-COVID-19, or at least post this lockdown, as it seems we'll have to live with COVID-19 for a while. I'd like to begin by, turning to each of my guests in turn and asking them, firstly, about what they've been doing personally during the lockdown. How have the last few weeks been for them? And also to give a sense of them to our readers, why don't you tell me about one book which shaped the way you think about the world or was a really big influence on you? I'll start with you, Alexandra.
Okay, so lockdown, as we all know, lockdown happened very suddenly, and Bloomsbury actually reacted very quickly and sent us all home a few days before lockdown happened. So we were ensconced in our homes and had our systems up and running, which was great. And what I realized very soon was that you had to get a kind of rhythm to your day and a routine, because otherwise you were in this bizarre other world. So a lot of it is for my daily life is about getting up and going for a walk before I settle down to work. And then I'm in front of my laptop all day. I mean, literally from, 9:30 until 6:30. And a lot of it is the usual stuff of doing emails, but the great big adjustment for me has been doing virtual meetings. And at the beginning you think, oh, this is fine, it's great, but I don't think it's so fine. It's all right if there are just a few of us like we are now, and we can all see each other and talk. But if you're in a publishing meeting where there are 35 people, it's very cumbersome and curiously exhausting. So a lot of my day is about that. And then trying, as is always the case, I think, for editors, trying to find the time to do your reading and editing. And it's just as difficult when you're at home as it is when you're in the office, I find. And then trying to differentiate between the weekdays and the weekends, which I think is a very important thing. And then you want to have the book that changed my life. Okay, when I was a teenager, my father came back from Nigeria, where he used to work. He was a teacher, and he used to work in Africa in his school holidays. with the West African Examination Syndicate, and he came back one summer with a copy of Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. And reading that novel changed everything for me, because it showed me that you could literally turn the world on its axis and look at it in a completely different way. And for me, the reading experience was never the same since. And I think much of my publishing as an adult comes out of that experience.
Diya, what about you?
Well, the lockdown was overnight, I think, for us. We had no idea that we weren't going to go back to our desks the next day. And while it's been relatively, it's been productive in the sense that we've had meetings, we've had ideas, we're trying to buy things. It's been hard. Initially, it was quite hard for me, I think, to read. I found it difficult to focus. I have an 18-month-old at home, and I think I echo Alexandra's sentiments when she says that, routine was really what saved me, I think. It really helps to have a routine, and especially with a little child, it's really like clockwork. So, I know exactly when I'm waking up, when I'm, giving him a bath, feeding. But it also meant juggling office work and housework, and, cleaning the house and doing other things, and making sure there were meals on the table. And for us, it's a little different from Alexandra, because if you have a child, or if you have parents or in-laws staying with you, it makes you high risk, and you try not to get out of the house. So you're kind of dependent on other people delivering groceries and things. So it's been very busy. I'm very grateful for being busy, because I think being busy and routine have really kept me from, I've had, you have good days and bad days, and touch wood, I've had really no time to mope and be miserable. And I know how bleak and dark some days can look when you think that, this is kind of never ending, and you really don't know when life will resume. This is the new normal. We don't know what life will be after lockdown. I think a lot of things will change for us, but yes. So I've had my hands full, and fortunately, I had a wonderful manuscript which we'll be publishing in December or January. So I had to edit it. I mean, I had to do primary edits on it and get back to the author. And I was very lucky that I had that, because I could immerse myself in it. And I managed to get out of that whole, not being able to read. And once that happened, I was able to read manuscripts more. And, there have been submissions, which I look forward to reading at the end of the day. And regarding the book, I don't think there's any one book that really changed my life. I think at different stages of my life, books have meant a lot to me, and spoken to me in different ways, and helped me at different stages. But I think The Little Prince has been a book that I've read since I was about 11. I don't read it every year, but I have read it at very significant points in my life at different times, and I have found it had messages for me that that were very, very powerful.
Thanks, Sayantan.
It's not been very different for me. For me, it's been difficult, like as Alexandra and Diya has mentioned. But it's not been too difficult, because I usually don't go out much, so other than work. So yes, reading has been a little challenging at least for the first 1 week or 2 days. It was a little difficult to concentrate on even work, and I was very vocal. Like when it's the new normal, we are moving towards whatever that is, and you get used to anything. We are creatures of conditioning, so we slowly, mold ourselves into whatever we are offered. I've also felt very lucky to be in a position where I have the luxury of sitting at home and actually have food on my plate and books to read and things to watch. I have complained about chores. I have complained about, I was a terrible cook before this lockdown began. Uh, I am thankfully a little better now because there's nothing else to do. But for all of that, I felt very lucky as well that when you look outside and when you look on your television screens and see what's going on, this is nothing in comparison. Uh, Otherwise, it's been mostly, a little bit of reading, a little bit of attempting to write, a little bit of watching Netflix, the usual things. Not very different. Speaking to a couple of friends now and then, that helps. And everyone is more or less going through the same thing, right? So it's easy to relate to people also at this point. When you're going online, you're seeing people post about literally the similar kind of issues that you're going through. So it's easier that way. You feel like you're part of a larger group and not left alone in a situation like this. Yeah, that's about it. And a book, again, like Diya mentioned, there's no one book I can pick up and say that this is the one book which changed my life. But at the current moment, it's probably Kafka's Metamorphosis, because every morning I wake up and feel like a giant insect, and I'm not complaining because because I know where it's headed if I go back to that book.
That's a very vivid image. One of the things that struck me is that all of you are not just publishers but also readers. You've been talking right now about how you've been reading through this lockdown and so on. And so I really have a two-part question here, which is part one is that as editors, how much of the kind of books that you look for is um, based on your own taste, and how much of it is based on what you think people are reading and people are interested in? And part two of that is that, given that, how do you think, do you have any kind of sense right now of how reading habits might be changing? And if you have to pay attention to that, then what are the kind of books that you would look for going forward? Alexandra?
Well, I think I'm an old-fashioned editor in lots of ways, and I feel that everything that editors do is based on their own taste, and in the end, that's all we have is our taste. And I mistrust young editors who are always talking about the market and running after what is thought to be the next big thing. And I think there's some people who are better at that than others. I'm certainly not. I have to respond really profoundly and powerfully to something to take it on, and particularly nowadays because I'm taking on very few new authors. But I do feel that's all you have, and you have to listen to yourself and you have to build your own confidence. And if you feel that you want other people to read this book, it's like when you're reading it and you think, I want to give it to this person and that person, and I want to take it out into the world, I want to share it with the world. That for me is the most powerful thing you have as an editor. And then on top of that, obviously you have to be smart about how you do that and who you think it's going to go to. And of course, you take it to the editorial meeting and your colleagues might completely disagree with you, or, and they will think about the marketing, but it all starts from your own taste. And then in terms of what's happening now, I mean, it's interesting to see, there are very obvious things like cookery, those of us who've never cooked before and now wanting cookery books, and we're all having to cook 2 or 3 times a day instead of like once at the most. Apparently children's books are doing incredibly well, but on my side of publishing, people are clearly liking escapist fiction and fiction that takes you into, because we can't travel. We're all literally scarcely go outside our front doors. So to read books that take you into another country, we've just published a novel by Polly Sampson about 1960 in Hydra in Greece, when Mellon Cohen stepped onto that island, and there was a group of artists and writers and musicians, and the novel is sun-drenched and filled with the wonderful sea and the atmosphere and so on. And it went to number 2 in the bestseller list. And I'm sure that the timing of it was a great help for that novel. And then I think also consolation. People want to feel sort of looked after in some way. And the very big book that we have coming up is Rutger Bregman's Humankind. And it's really about how basically human beings are good people. And we think this is going to be a very big book for us. And then the other thing is, I think people want to make sense of this world. And I think that might come later afterwards, but I think the sort of history, obviously the history of pandemics, but the history of great upheavals in life, because certainly in Europe, we've had such a steady life and we've all felt very looked after, and everything has been very easy for us. And now we realize that nothing is safe any longer. And again, for me, I grew up just after the war. So that post-war world, you were very connected to the fact that your parents had been in the war. My mother had been in the Blitz. My father had been in Africa and India during the war. They had this chunk of their lives, these 5 years, which were completely upheaved. But since my generation, I don't think people feel connected to that. And I think people will want to connect back into these periods of history.
And Diya, much as Alexandra was speaking about Europe being stable through all these decades and so on, in a sense, there has been one upheaval in India, which, all of us have lived through, and through your long career you've seen as well, which is basically post-liberalization, a lot of people, coming into the middle class and therefore buying books and reading and so on. So can you also sort of give me a sense of how through these years reading habits have changed and shifted and evolved in addition to what I asked earlier, of course?
So there are 3 points now, Amit. So one is, I think, what people are turning to right now, at this time during the lockdown, when you're unable to get out, and people are turning to, as Alexandra said, books of consolation. I know a lot of people who have repeatedly told me that they are going back to their old favorites, classics, things that they want to reread for comfort. People are interested in, in healthcare, in the environment, in self-improvement. We are about to publish a book that we had on our list already signed up, but it's very, very well timed. It's a book on anxiety, and that comes out tomorrow. And it's about how to overcome it so that you can live without fear. And I know a lot of people are waiting for it, because anxiety has been, topmost. I mean, people are really anxious about this time. They're feeling nervous. They're feeling insecure. And we really don't have any answers. I think at the moment, people are interested in, in popular science, in the history of pandemics, in upheaval. But I'm also wondering how, whether these areas of interest and whether these trends will, whether they will last well beyond, this time. Will people still be interested in pandemic fiction after this is over? I'm not sure, because there might be people who don't want to read any more of that, because you're just so, there's been so much of it. I mean, but those are things that we'll need to wait and see. A lot of people who've never read nonfiction before, or have never read, the irony is that it's a time that we are sort of so we feel the distance, we feel being apart from the people we love, our friends and family. And yet it's we've never been closer. People have made such an effort to reach out and keep in touch. And people who've never read fiction, nonfiction before, have actually told me that for the first time they've been reading memoirs, the lives of others. It's about human contact. It's about relationships. People are interested in how, in other people. And so I think those are the trends that we are seeing right now. How much of it we're going to see later on is, I think, part of what our panel, I think our panel is supposed to discuss that. The other question that you had asked is about the changing, how tastes have changed. In India, I still feel that the English, we're talking here primarily about the English language, trade publishing is what I'm guessing. Sayantan and I are both, we work in English language publishing, and uh, I think that it's still, I mean, the numbers are, of course, quite small compared to, the numbers that Alexandra is used to, for instance. The other thing that, I think what's interesting has been, yes, we've seen lots of trends over the years, whether it's fiction by women, whether it's, lad lit for want. I'm not a huge fan of these terms, but we've seen the rise of the romance, mythology. There have been all these genres that have sort of become popular. There's been there's college fiction. Non-fiction has been really popular of late, and different kinds of nonfiction, I think. And it's a very exciting time to be publishing nonfiction, I think, because the range has been very, very diverse. But the other thing, the thing that really excites me, and the thing that I think that we should all be, focused on quite seriously, is how this has changed the way we read and the way we publish. I think that is a very interesting thing, because we are, unlike in London, we don't have access to actual physical books at the moment. Amazon's not delivering books, and books are not considered essential items at the moment. And so we are completely reliant on, when it's new material, we're reliant on ebooks. So in fact, we're publishing e-first. Tomorrow, when we bring out the book on anxiety, it's going to be the e-launch. And we're going to have to do this until the presses start functioning again, until delivery services are up and running, until all the bookstores open. And I think one thing that this time has taught us is how to really think about staying afloat when when presses are shut, bookstores are shut, and we don't have access to physical books.
Yeah, and just thinking aloud and carrying on from what you said about how reading is changing, is that there is that view that reading increases empathy, and it strikes me that the causation could go the other way. And if the shared experience of the lockdown is making us a little more empathetic towards others and entering others' lives, maybe we'll read more, or maybe that's just the optimist in me speaking. Shantan, I'm not going to, add to those questions and troll you by putting a fourth one in there. But, why don't we move on to talking about the different ways in which people are reading now? For example, one thing that publishers have often told me is that ebooks are overrated, in the sense that everyone imagined 10 years ago that one day everything will be ebooks. But by and large, what has happened is they haven't taken off, at least in India, in that sense yet, and physical books are still the whole deal. But during this lockdown, obviously, the people don't have a choice. They have to, if they want to read new books, they have to go to their ebooks. What is your sense of this? Like, have you guys looked at ebooks in the past as just another niche that is out there, or do you think this will accelerate a shift towards ebooks going forward?
Yeah, certainly. I think the interest is growing. It didn't take off, like Diya mentioned, and you mentioned as well. But much like what Diya said they are doing, we've also just published a fiction title, Samit Basu's Chosen Spirits, first. We were obviously supposed to publish it in hardback, but given the circumstances, we decided that we'll go first, and it took off really well. I mean, we were all very pleasantly surprised by the way it began, because it really went into the number one position very quickly in the science fiction space, in the speculative space. But certainly, because I don't think anything of this sort our race has seen before, where collectively the whole world is going through something in common at the same time. Yes, it wasn't really a priority as far as publishers in India at least were concerned, because people didn't take to e-reading as much, but right now people are, and because of lack of choice, like Diya mentioned, Amazon is not delivering. The good news that I'm getting from different corners is that slowly bookstores are beginning to function again. Like Kerala has opened, I think, what I heard today from a couple of my colleagues is that a couple of bookstores in Delhi have opened their doors from 10 to 6. But these are, again, they're not the norm, they're the exception. So I don't know if there is a normal to go back to anymore, but even if we do, it will take months. And until then, not only ebooks, but I think audiobooks will also, gain a large share of the market, and they should, because I'm guilty of that too. I'm used to reading ebooks, but I'm not used to audiobooks at all. One of the reasons being that they're more expensive in comparison. So hopefully that's one thing publishers together can look at, and also service providers can look at together in providing audiobooks at a slightly more affordable rates. But people are certainly getting more and more used to listening to, like for instance your podcast. It's so popular, and I'm sure you've seen a surge in popularity as a result of this lockdown, because people are home, people are exploring new avenues. So yes, certainly I'm hopeful that it's not going to. It's obviously right now it's quite messy. We had a team meeting even today, and everything looks bleak right now because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what the numbers are going to be like. We are selling books on Kindle, but those numbers are not also immediately available, as opposed to, say, physical books, which you have a fair share of an idea of what is selling and what kind of numbers they're doing. You don't know that right now. So yeah, but I'm hopeful that it's not going to be all negative a few months from now, because Alexandra mentioned the war. I mean, from what I've read, after the Second World War, I think sales in books actually went up. People read more than they read before. There are various reasons behind it, but if it can happen then, I'm sure a few months from now, when things go back to some sort of normalcy, we can again look at that kind of a space where not only, like you said, like not only physical books, but all books in all formats do well, better than before. Because I think a lot of people who didn't even have the habit of reading are tired of watching content online and are turning to books because they have books at home. I have friends who live with flatmates who never read. But right now, because they have nothing to do, they're walking around the house all day long. They'll look at a book, and if it looks interesting to them, and if the blurb sounds interesting, they'll actually pick it up and start reading it. I mean, I don't know how much of a large-scale change this will bring, but even these little things count. And eventually, I think, as a whole, it'll have a positive impact on books and sales of books.
And just to add a small point about audiobooks, typically the use case for podcasts and audio listening is one of three: when people are working out, commuting, or doing errands. And obviously, there are more Indians doing errands now, but otherwise, working out and commuting have kind of suffered. And therefore, in that sense, I think all podcast numbers are a little down. But I mean, it's interesting to notice that that's a different use case, because that means that audiobooks is something that people can listen to supplemental to the other reading they might do. And if people live busy lives in which they don't have time to actually read a book, whether a physical book or an ebook, they can still listen when they are commuting. Yeah. So, it's a supplemental thing. What we've seen across sectors recently is that industries which have low margins, for them, like restaurants, for example, or the hospitality business, you lose a month or two of sales and you can be devastated. And smaller businesses shutting down everywhere because of this, because they can't take even this hit. Give me a sense of what it is like in publishing. Like, I'm assuming for the bigger players, it's kind of, you can get by this. For the smaller players, does it matter? Like, I mean, I'm guessing these are 2 months where even if people are reading more or buying a few more ebooks, overall sales must have completely gone close to zero. So Alexandra, what are you seeing where you are?
Well, it is quite scary, because as much as anything, because we don't know how long it's going to go on for. And I think that there is a difference between the big corporations and the smaller places. And although we call ourselves a medium-sized independent, we are a publicly owned company, and so we have to be profitable. And so every penny counts. It really, really matters. So a lot of publishers are shifting publications and moving them into the autumn, and we are sticking with, which is very popular with the press because they have something to write about, but it's quite scary. There are some books that will survive fine because when the bookshops open again, people will find them. And the ones that I feel really anxious about are the tender shoots, the first novels, the books that need coaxing out into the world. But we're doing it, and we have to do it. And I think that we have to just all hope that it doesn't stay like this, that there will be other ways of buying books. The good thing, of course, is ebook sales going up, audiobook sales are really healthy, and that was a very good market anyway before all of this happened. There was a huge flourishing in listening to books, and we keep going with our physical books, but it's heart-rending in many ways. It's difficult.
And they are speaking from an Indian perspective. I mean, you not only have to, go through the daily grind of whatever work you have to do, but in a sense, you guys must also be planning for what comes after this. Getting through the PTSD of the effects of this lockdown and so on. Do you have a sense of the change direction that you might take after all this is over, or just going forward, because we don't know when it will be over?
Amit, we've actually tried to carry on business as usual during this period, and we've had our team meetings. I had no idea about Zoom and MS Teams and Google Hangout, and I don't know, there must be half a dozen other things, but we've managed to discuss a lot. I think one of the things that makes people anxious is that there's all this time. What are we going to do to fill that time? And sometimes it's a day of back-to-back meetings, and you feel so exhausted. Sometimes you feel you've done more meetings now than you used to do when you were in the office. Yes. And of course, not to mention all the the horrendous reports on social media that that are enough to really paralyze you. But we've tried to carry on as we could, as far as we could, try to, of course, the routine, the publishing schedule has gone for a toss because we couldn't bring out a bunch of books, on time. We've had to postpone books, but the plan is that things are on track. In the sense that we still have, we are still sort of working towards our print ready dates, our CRCs as we call it. We are still carrying on. We have our scheduling meetings once a week. We are going ahead, looking at covers, and even though they're ebooks, they're still, we're still working as though we are sending our books to press. The only difference is that we don't know when the print edition is going to be out. We are all hoping for a time. I mean, we hope that it might take 6 months. It might take, because I think as you rightly said, that the larger companies, they are sort of, they're better protected. And it's frightening for even us, but it's really quite precarious for independent bookstores, for independent publishing houses, because I can't even imagine how difficult it must be. I think right now, the whole idea is to stay afloat, trying to figure out ways, new ways in which we can sell and market and read and continue to publish. But it's very hard, because even though in India ebook sales and actually audiobook sales are up, it's a drop in the ocean. It's minuscule. So there are things that we will need to do as an industry, I think, to protect one another. And one of the first things I think that a lot of people are trying to convince the government is that books are essential. So that I think is a huge, there's a huge task ahead of us.
Sayantan, how does going forward, do you feel that there will be the need for publishers, because of the imperative of staying afloat somehow till this is over, to cut costs now, maybe to sign less writers, do less big launches? Is there going to be an effect of that sort? And then, of course, effects of that sort can also run the danger of becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, how have you looked at all of that?
I think that process has already begun. I'm sure those discussions are already happening during team meetings across the board, because big launches are out of the question right now. We have already conveyed that to most of our authors. Books we are going to publish once this is over in physical form as well. And everyone, the good part is that nobody is removed from what's happening. So everyone is aware. Authors thankfully are a community who are very supportive, which is very supportive of publishers. They have been completely welcoming of the idea that in the end, the book has to reach out to the maximum number of readers. It doesn't matter if it gets a launch per se. Marketing costs have to be cut down. The idea is to publish each book as well as we can, as well as we were doing before this. The peripheral costs have to go down. There is I don't think it's an alternative right now, at least in the near future. So yeah, but what else did you ask? Is that?
Yeah, essentially, what do you see changing about the way that you function in the months to come? Like, has your mindset, changed with how you look to books and how you look to the market?
Not particularly. Like Diya mentioned, we are also trying to take it business as usual, because it's one of the ways to actually stay sane. Otherwise, we'll all lose our minds eventually. Because of the uncertainty of it all, we absolutely have very little idea what's going to happen. 2 days from now, 3 days from now, the lockdown is definitely going to get extended, but for how long? And what will be the new measures that will be taken? So we don't know what's going to happen. Yes, in the sense that, say, the kind of books that we are going to publish, maybe once this is over, we are going to shuffle our list a little bit and see what we can publish before. For instance, I don't think, like Alexandra mentioned, a book which gives you an immediate escape would probably, it's again a probability, we don't know for sure, but probably do well with readers. But writing, say, a travel book won't make sense right now because nobody's going to travel. So those are the things we have to take into consideration. But otherwise, looking at trends, if you look at a post SARS, when SARS happened, at a post SARS world, somehow mystery sold a lot, is what I've heard. I was obviously not a part of the industry then, but whereas post Ebola, it was all self-help. After the 2007 and 8, the recession, it was mostly romance and politics which sold, according to New York Times. So one never knows what's going. But yes, something with a happy ending, people will be looking forward to something like that, right? Because I don't think we have one, so at least we can read about it.
No, I think that yes, I think that we really don't have the answers now. It'll be very interesting to see how things pan out in terms of trends and what people want to read. But I think I mean I have to agree with Sayantan that I think our authors are all mature. We work with agents who are well aware of the circumstances. I think that we want to keep this industry alive and well, and we will need to make sure that we honor our agreements as best we can when we're signing up authors and things. There's there are advances to be paid and things like that, and we'll have to proceed with caution. We have to make sure, already pretty much know that no one's traveling anywhere in a hurry. So travel budgets have been slashed. There are not going to be, huge lavish book parties and launches and things. But I don't think anyone really expects those either.
Is there an end to lit festivals?
You'll have to ask the Lit Fest directors. There are lots of Lit Fests online at the moment.
Yes.
So that should answer your question.
Lit Fest on Zoom with 500 windows.
But the same number of people attending. So it's not...
Yeah, or engaging, in fact. Yeah, I mean, this is a Lit Fest of sorts. So, yeah. Exactly. So, a closing question for all of you, but it's a multi-part question. It's a long question, which is, I mean, the serious part of it is, let's say, looking 2 years into the future, looking to the point where we reach some kind of normalcy, where hopefully there's a vaccine and the social distancing is not such a big deal anymore. What's your best case scenario and your worst case scenario for publishing? That's part one. And part two is not really a question, but what I'd like you to do is leave our listeners with some lockdown reading. What books would you recommend that they should read now? Maybe something that can give them a little bit of escape from this, or some enlightenment, or even changing into insects. Alexandra, I'll come to you first.
2 years into the future. I mean, one of the things about publishing, which has always been the case, is that we never know. We just don't know. We chase dreams, we hope we can know, but we don't. And maybe it's even more uncertain now, but it was ever thus. It was ever thus. And I think that's one of the things that makes it such a fascinating profession, is that nothing is guaranteed. And you can have people say, well, why don't you publish more bestsellers? And you say, if we only knew, all you have is your instinct. But I think that I think the world will just reestablish itself. I don't think there'll be any great changes. I think that what happens, for example, after 9/11 is that there weren't many novels that was about it. It needed time until it found its way into fiction. And I think that will be the case with this pandemic, so that not so much even in 2 years' time, but more like 5 years' time, that will start emerging. And otherwise, I think people will want a lot of, in fiction, I think people will either want novels that take you into another world. I think mythology, it's interesting that that's become such a big thing. And we had the wonderful Madeline Miller's Circe, which was such a huge success. And that is selling incredibly well through lockdown. And I think that those sorts of books that take you into another world will still do extremely well. And novels and nonfiction that help you make sense of the world that we're in, either through history or through philosophy. I think, as I said before, the Rutger Bregman, Humankind, is likely to be a book that everybody will want to read. But if we only could gaze into that crystal ball, our lives would be so much easier. But we can't. We don't. With the thing about publishing is, in the end, we don't really know what we're doing. There's a lot of praying goes on. A great deal of optimism, and publishers also have to be able to deal with failure, because there's a lot of failure that happens,
And you have just failed to give us lockdown reading.
Well, lockdown reading, I always think that beloved Elizabeth Gilbert has so much to offer us, whether it's through her nonfiction, obviously Eat, Pray, Love, and her inspirational books, but I think her fiction is absolutely wonderful, because it gives you her heart, her understanding of human nature. So her novel City of Girls, and her backlist novel The Signature of All Things, which is a huge favorite of mine. I mean, what wonderful worlds to disappear into. So I think you can't go wrong with Liz Gilbert.
Thanks for that. And Diya, I'm not asking you guys to look into a crystal ball, but more contemplate a range of possibilities. Like, what are you hopeful for, and what's like the worst case scenario, or even just a former of those if you don't want to, get to that.
Well, I have to say that this is, I think that the way we work is going to change. I think that in our industry here in India, I don't think people believed that we could work from home. And while, some of us were allowed to do that, I think this has proved that we not only can work from home, but we're pretty productive as well. Having said that, I have to say I miss, the interaction, the daily interaction with people. I miss sitting around a conference table and meeting people. I miss the foul coffee in the coffee machine. I miss all of those things, and so I hope that things can go back to being maybe a little bit more like the way they were. At the same time, I mean, it's. As Alexandra said, I don't think one can ever tell. It's publishing has always been hit and miss, and I think that's part of the thrill. And I think that even though there have been so many upheavals and changes, I think there's still a lot of there's scope for exciting new things as well. New platforms, new ways of doing things, and I think we need to focus on those things and move forward and still try and come up with ideas that that shape taste and that reflect your own taste and that give people what they're looking for. So that I guess, and I had one more thought, is that I was just wondering whether all this wouldn't have been possible if we didn't have technology. So if this had happened maybe 10 or 15 years ago,
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine how different it would have been?
Exactly. The thought struck me 20 years ago, and there's no internet and no Zoom, and what are we doing?
Exactly.
No ebooks.
Amazing.
Yeah. Now give us some lockdown reading, because we are not in 20 years ago.
I really think that if you're able to read, and if you, I think you should just read anything that makes you feel better about the situation. I mean, just, better, forget the situation, just that anything that makes you feel good. I don't like prescribing things. And then, do I really have to single out any one thing? It'll have to be from my list.
No worries. Let's move on to Sayantan. What do you feel?
Taking a cue from what Diya said and what Alexandra said. I'm not going to repeat the same things again, because I agree with exactly what they're saying. But taking a cue from what Diya had earlier said about books being essential, that's one thought I think that we need to constantly keep hammering into the heads of people around us. I mean, a lot of people already know it is, because imagine a period like this without technology. It's terrifying. But imagine a period like this without art. If we didn't have cinema, if we didn't have books, if we didn't have music, we would be dead by now. We would have killed each other by now, all of us. So the idea that books are essential, that art is essential at a time like this, and in an ever-changing world, it's going to be even more essential to the world we're looking at. So that's an idea we have to not only propagate, but also practice. Once everything goes back to how they were, we have to support independent bookstores. We have to go out and buy books from them. We have to call and pre-order books from them if needed at a time like this, at least for the next 1 year, 2 years. I don't know how long, because much like publishing, the bigger players are always going to somehow survive. People will lose jobs. People will suffer, but the organizations more or less will stay afloat. But the smaller ones will suffer, much like independent bookstores, which anyway the number is dwindling in India, and if we cannot afford to lose any more. Authors, we have to keep supporting them. We have to keep supporting them by doing the regular things like sharing their work online. We all are online all day. We just ensure that we share an essay by an author we like, the Amazon link to a book they have written that we have liked, and it's probably not as popular anymore. Little things like that as a community, I think if we can do, we can be better off in the future. Other than that, it's dicey, because my favorite quote ever written is by William Golding, who said, "Nobody knows anything," and that's what I believe in. I mean, it's literally
absolutely.
Well, one can add to that what Kane said about in the long run we are all dead. Before I come back to you for your lockdown reading,
Yeah.
what you said threw up a question which I'll open to all the panelists, which is that if you are a reader and you want to support the publishing industry during this time because you care about books, you pointed out, call independent bookstores, pre-order books, and so on. What else can readers do?
Well, I think that actually what you were touching on before, which is that how we interact online is an important thing, and particularly for me, it seems to me that there's a lot going on Instagram, and I have authors who are doing Instagram live interviews, and so being part of that and helping it and coming up with ideas. And one of the things that I've found really interesting is seeing how inventive our marketing people are being at this time. And I think it's shifting the way people are looking at how to get books out into the world. And I think it's all of our responsibility to be involved in that.
Shantan, now I shall ask you for your lockdown reading.
Okay. I'll again, like Diya said, it's not picking a book it's difficult, but I'll still give you some from the top of my head. Olivia Lang's Lonely City. It's a book one must read at a time like this because it's something we are all going through, but it also presents beautiful portraits of people we have most of us haven't even heard of or have long forgotten. Something just to hold on to, relate to. Teju Kole's essays, because they're just so comforting at any time. But right now I'm finding them particularly comforting because he's traveling throughout his book of essays. He's writing about little things. He's like writing about people who are not famous people. He's just writing about life in general and observing it at a very organic, personal level. And particularly for the third and final book that I can think of right now is a very fun book called Super Sad True Love Story by Gary Steingart. Which is set in a post-apocalyptic sort of a post-dystopian world where the Chinese are taking over most of the world, and it's a love story between two people, an immigrant girl from East Asia and this son of a janitor. So but they're not supposed to go out on the streets because the army has taken over. So they have to figure out a way. So it's fun, but it's also relevant. So yeah, and it's also a love story.
Thanks, Evan. I can't wait to read whichever of these books I haven't read yet. And thanks so much for sharing your insights on this panel with us. And for everyone listening in, thank you for joining in to this discussion. Please do follow Roli Books on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for updates on more such exciting activities from Roli Pulse. Whatever happens to literary festivals, Roli Pulse is there, so don't worry. Stay well and believe in books.
Thank you, Amit.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.